Good morning. Welcome to Sacred Place Live. I'm your host, Matthew. Make sure there's no feedback. There we go. It's good to be with you again. Today we continue our fall series, which goes all the way until Advent. So I should probably just stop saying that because it's going to be the same for many more weeks. Well, I mean, it's already mid-October. The fact that Christmas is like 2.5 months away is a little terrifying. But we are turning into the next section of the series where we began looking at those who we often call stranger and what it looks like to see no stranger, which is the title of the book. But now we turn to opponents, not enemies, but maybe a better way of looking at it is those who are opposed to the things which we hold dear, the things for which we work as a people. This chapter was a more difficult one, I think, for us to hear and to read. If you were able to do that, you still should. It's an important part of Valerie's story that I think reveals this aspect of understanding how we love those who oppose us. The first part she experiences is rage. Not just anger, but rage, which I think is a deeper emotion that is a little more visceral, maybe. A little more responsive to the ways that we have been hurt by others. And we see that in Scripture at times, and I have a specific example for us today. But first, I want to open us with a song.
Oh, mother, 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 there's far too many of you crying. Oh, brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. No, we've got to find a way, bring some love in here today. Oh, Father, 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 we don't need to escalate. Oh, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. No, we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Picket lines and picket signs, don't punish me with brutality. Come on and talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Oh, hey, yeah, yeah. Oh, mother, 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 everybody thinks we're wrong. Oh, but who are they to judge us simply 'cause our hair is long? No, we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Yeah. Picket lines and picket signs, don't punish me with brutality. Come on and talk to me so you can see, hey, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What is going on? Hey, yeah. punish me with brutality. Come on and talk to me so you can see what is going on. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Oh, what is going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Hey, yeah. What is going on?
Our first reading is, or our only reading from Scripture, but our Scripture reading is from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 11. The next day, after leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. From far away, he noticed a fig tree in leaf. So he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing except leaves, since it wasn't the season for figs. So he said to it, "No one will ever eat your fruit. Again, eat your fruit." His disciples heard this. They came into Jerusalem. After entering the temple, he threw out those who were selling and buying there. He pushed over the tables used for currency exchange and the chairs of those who sold doves. He didn't allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He taught them, "Hasn't it been written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you've turned it into a hideout for crooks." The chief priests and legal experts heard this and tried to find a way to destroy him. They regarded him as dangerous because the whole crowd was enthralled at his teaching. When it was evening, Jesus and his disciples went outside the city. So here is an example from Jesus' life where we see some anger, some rage. We'll get into what Valerie describes as rage and how that is helpful in loving our opponents. But I first want to look at this story from Jesus. His life. We think of Jesus as perfect, which he was, but he still got angry. He still raged because he saw injustice. It wasn't just that the temple was being defiled in a way, that commerce and money changing were happening there. I think it was because the people were being shortchanged. They were being cheated. It was the presence of the empire there with, as we saw in our kids' time this morning, in the kids' Bible, they had pictures of the coins of the temple, and they had Roman symbols on them. Greek gods and the Roman eagle, the symbol of the emperor. And the Roman legion even. So this abuse of power, I think, was clear in the commerce that was happening here. And this place that was meant for worship, for people to come together, was instead being used to further oppression. So when Jesus saw that, he chose to fight against it which is what we talked about last week. But in that rage for his own people, I think he was responding to the things he knew would come. The ways that the empire would affect his own life, and already had. So we see this example from Jesus of maybe a divine rage, which exists not to just be reactionary or an outburst of emotion, but rather rage to create change, to reorder the world. Valerie shares some of this in her own story. As I mentioned earlier, it's a more difficult chapter because it addresses the ways in which she found rage and struggled with it because of sexual assaults in her life and police violence in her life. And we see throughout the chapter that she keeps trying to push down that rage. In fact, she writes, I thought of all of us who have been trained to suppress our rage. Women, especially women of color. Rage is a healthy, normal, and necessary response to trauma. It is a rightful response to the social traumas of patriarchy, white supremacy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and poverty. So through her story, which I'm not going to retell, it's up to you to go read that, I think. She discovered that the rage that she felt from the trauma that she had experienced wasn't something to be pushed down or ignored, but instead to learn from it. One of the things she wrote that she had to learn was that she had to learn to ask, what is my rage trying to tell me? The trauma that she had experienced was something that she hadn't yet learned to deal with. And this visceral rage which she felt was telling her that she needed to deal with it, to find a safe place to unpack that rage so that it could be transformed into something which creates a laser focus for creating change in the world. This whole section is about loving our opponents, and she was intentional in choosing the word opponent because I think she would agree with me based on what I've read and understood, and is even in the reading and learning guide. The word enemy feels very permanent. If you think of someone who is your enemy, as a child, it's the person who you will never see as a friend. Someone who is an enemy now is someone who is so different from us and so against us that we struggle to see them as a person sometimes. So if we look at someone as an opponent, they are someone who disagrees with us, and minds and hearts can be changed, even our own, to see someone who the relationship with whom can be fluid and changeable. Rage is a practice of dealing with our own woundedness so that we can see the woundedness in others and those who oppose us. And then maybe we can find ways to create healing. I think we'll get to that in the next chapter. But rage is useful. Valerie goes on to write, divine rage is fierce, disciplined, and visionary. The aim of divine rage is not vengeance, but to reorder the world. It is precise and purposeful. It points us to the humanity of even those who we are fighting. So we talked about fighting last week, that to fight for others is an act of love. In revolutionary love, rage is necessary in the practice of loving others. I didn't put this on a slide, but Valerie writes, perhaps our task as human beings is to find safe containers for our raw reactionary rage, and then choose to harness that energy in a way that creates a new world for all of us. The rage which she felt about her own wounds was transformed into a useful rage, which continued to fuel her activism, which is where she experienced some of that trauma and woundedness. But she begins to turn that into healing for herself, and then into the energy needed to create change in the world so that the world could be healed. Jesus' rage against the injustice that he saw in the temple, a place of worship, was a part of his broader work to fight for the marginalized and oppressed, to prepare himself for the trauma that he would experience at the hands of the empire, maybe even. But to see those who opposed him not as an enemy or an evil that cannot be transformed. Even in his last moments, he forgives those who do the work of the empire in executing him. He sees the woundedness in others, the rage which they themselves have, and begins to work against it by dismantling those power structures, even in just the smallest ways, of turning over tables which create an unjust marketplace for God's people there in a place of worship. So my question for you is, how will you use the things that anger you, that create rage in you? In my own recent experience, I've continued to be angry by the behaviors of others, to see a little bit of rage for the ways in which this pandemic has gone on longer than it should have, has been harder on all of us than was necessary. And I don't blame the people who have some bad behaviors. My rage was initially reactionary to that, sure. But I began to look deeper into how they came to believe what they believe that creates their behavior. And then I see my rage directed at that, at the ways Christianity has been used to perpetuate systems of systemic racism, of privilege, of supremacy. So often, white supremacy and Christian supremacy go hand in hand. And I have rage against that. I am mournful of the hurt that has been caused by those who call themselves Christians. So I had to find that place, that way of dealing with the reaction, often in conversation with my husband, who is so patient with me. And then choosing to take that energy and direct it at creating a new world for all of us, as Valerie writes. So, rage is a practice of revolutionary love, even if it may not seem that rage and love go together. But raging for the sake of justice is a way of loving even those who oppose us. It's necessary in loving those who oppose us because we have to deal with our woundedness to be able to do that, and to see the woundedness in others. And then to begin to look for the source of that so that we can fight to change it. For those who have been marginalized and oppressed by the systems of this country, those who are Black, those who are women, especially women of color, those who are trans, those who are LGBT, I already said T, but those who are marginalized by the way of our being in this country. We can learn from the rage that those communities have experienced to learn about how we do justice. I mean, tomorrow is Indigenous Peoples Day. What do we understand about the rage of the people who were here before any of our ancestors? The rage which goes on to fight for justice for those who are indigenous to all lands. How can we be a generative force for change through rage? I think rage can be that fire that ignites within us a discomfort for the way things are, so that we work to change them. There are some resources I will share on our website of further things that might help us understand the rage of others, so that we can find the need for justice in that. First, we have to deal with our own rage before we can go beyond that. So if you have that work to do, I encourage you and invite you to find safe places to unpack that. That might be among us, it might not. But hear that you shouldn't repress or suppress your rage. Yes, you have to be careful with it so that it's not just a reactionary thing, so that it can be honed and focused as energy that creates change. But it's going to be a little uncomfortable. I mean, rage as a divine thing is going to make people uncomfortable, because it can feel disruptive and unloving when we're talking about revolutionary love. But we can't silence the pain of ourselves and others. We can't tame public expression for the sake of being kind or civil, because that just allows things that are unjust to perpetuate, to continue to exist. So maybe we just need to learn to hear the rage in others and direct our rage at the right places. Not adjust people's actions, but the systems which perpetuate and create them. I have a song for us now. As we think about the rage from our own trauma and the trauma we see in others.
I looked into my heart and saw a darkness, deep and ancient chill within my bones. Ever since the envy that spilled a brother's blood, we're all dying to throw stones. And from St. Louis springs a riot for all of the kids not coming home. And I see a struggle that binds us all tonight, that marches the streets to atone. Mama, I'm having those bad dreams again. The wicked don't pay for what they done. Mama, the evil that dwells in hearts of men, no peace or justice under the sun. On a cold November's afternoon in Cleveland, child with his cheap plastic girl, only 3:30, and they left him there to bleed. Too young to learn, he didn't have time to run. Mama, I'm having those bad dreams again, where the wicked don't pay for what they done. Mama, the evil that dwells in hearts of men, no peace or justice under the sun. Father of 6 in New York City, selling cigarettes out in the street, dying in daylight for all of us to see. 'Cause I can't breathe, 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 I can't breathe. Mama, I'm having those bad dreams again, where the wicked don't pay for what they done. Mama, all the evil that dwells in hearts of men, no peace or justice under the sun. No peace or justice under the gun.
As we close, it may seem curious that rage is the first step in loving our opponents. But we cannot sustain love for those who oppose us without dealing with the ways they have hurt us, for the wounds in our own lives. Once we tend to those wounds, rage becomes a driving force which directs us toward change. And then we can tend to and listen to the wounds in those who oppose us. so that they too might find a rage for creating change, so that we might together create a just world for all of us. As we go from this time, I encourage you to read this chapter of Valerie's book if you haven't, because her story tells in ways that I cannot how rage works and doesn't work well when we are seeking to create a world that is more just. I hope that in a couple weeks we'll be having a picnic in person together. We'll still do some version of Facebook Live reflection that day. It'll be our first time doing that. I hope my phone works well enough to make that happen. I won't leave all of you hanging who are joining us from home, whether it's live on Sunday morning or some other time throughout the week. As I mentioned, there are a few more resources that I will be sharing on our website at yoursacredplace.org. There's a button on the homepage for this Revolutionary Love series, and there's a little bit for each week, whether it's the link to the YouTube version of this video so you can rewatch it or share it with someone, or the other resources that I think are helpful for us to understand each of these themes each week. Until next week, remember that as you deal with your own wounds, your own trauma, and find a rage that seeks to create change in this world, this is a safe place for you to do that. For this is your sacred place.